Welcome back. This is the second program in the series of short PowerPoint presentations to help you learn how to be successful in the respiratory therapy program. This section is going to deal with the objectives that you're going to have available to you. Some will be prepared by your instructors and provided to you either on paper or electronically. Others are those objectives contained in the textbooks that you have. So this is going to look a little bit at some of the ways that you might utilize those objectives to promote your learning. The unit objectives are going to be distributed as material is covered. Some of them you'll get at the beginning of the term, some of them you've already received. You will receive these before the material is covered in class, and they're really and truly designed to guide your reading, to help you figure out as you read the information, what should you be learning from that. And they will tell you what you need to know, what you need to be able to do, and they will really and truly guide you in several ways. The first of which I said is to decide, as you're doing the assigned reading, what should you really be looking for? What are the important things in that reading? The idea of the objectives is to provide you the background that you need so that you can actively participate in class as we take the general information that you should have learned from your reading and other sources of information you have available to you, and how do we apply that to actually caring for patients who need the help of a respiratory therapist. So before you begin to read your assigned areas or parts of the books, you should look through and understand the objectives so that you know really and truly what it is you should learn from those reading assignments. They should also then be your guide as you do that reading assignment, as you're thinking about what is the information I'm supposed to be learning from this, what do I need to know. You can use that to guide your reading. My recommendation to you is that you look at the objectives, you have a general idea of what it is you're looking for, read through the entire assigned reading, then come back and try to compare what you've read, what you've learned, to the specific objectives. And that's the point at which you will then type or add information onto those objectives before you submit them as an assignment. You would then use those objectives and the information that you've obtained from your reading as you participate in class. The objectives won't be, followed in a specific, rigid, consecutive order the way that they appear on the sheets, but the information you've learned from those objectives will be very important as we cover that material and talk about that material and learn about how to apply that in the class setting. And essentially the thing to know is that these unit objectives that you're provided by your instructors outline the minimum information that you need to know. They are, and again, not the complete guide to everything that someone needs to know to be a respiratory therapist. They help you with sort of the minimum things you need to learn. You're strongly encouraged to go beyond what's in those objectives. There's certainly things you're going to find in the reading that go beyond this minimum, and the more that you can understand and the more you can work with all of that information, the better off you're going to be. The instructors are going to be covering quite a bit of information in addition to what's in the textbook and what's listed on those objectives. The idea, once again, is to provide you with information on the wealth of experience that your instructors have, and to expand upon the most basic information that you're learning as you learn to become a respiratory therapist. And you certainly are encouraged, and you probably will need, depending on what your goals are, to learn other information that goes beyond what's on those objectives, what is talked about in class, what information other students as well as your instructors share as we go through this information. And the objectives should really serve to help you organize that information into something that makes sense. The amount of information you're going to be exposed to and the number of things you need to learn is going to be very large. And the better you can sort of organize that information, the easier it's going to be to deal with and to remember. So you'll be recording, either handwriting, typing, in some way entering the answers to the questions or the requests for information right onto those objective sheets, and that way you have them available to look at during class, to refer to some of that information, because you're probably and unlikely to memorize all of that on a first attempt. They will also provide some information to guide you as you prepare for tests. So they can sort of give you an idea, once again, of what's the minimum that you're going to need to understand, what's the minimum basic content that you need to be able to work with. You should, by the time you are ready to take the test, be able to answer all of those objectives without having to refer to the information that you've written on there. They would provide that guidance and that ability to be able to respond to each of those objectives and to relate that information. Any time you're working on these objectives and something doesn't make sense, what you've read, what you've heard, what you've seen, doesn't really seem to answer the item, or it's really still unclear as to what information you need to go with that objective, your best bet is to ask questions. You can do that in class. You can do that individually with the instructor. You could do it with fellow students, but I would suggest that you utilize the instructors because they're more likely to be able to tell you specifically what information you're expected to know. The books that you have for your resources as you go through the program also contain chapter objectives. The one difficulty with this is all of your reading assignments don't necessarily start at the beginning of each chapter. So I would encourage you once again, as you begin to do a reading assignment, you've looked at the unit objectives that were distributed, go back to the beginning of the chapter in which you're going to have the assigned reading. Take a look at the chapter objectives that are there. Take a look at what information is provided to you by the authors of the book to help guide, once again, your learning as you read that information. So they're at the beginning of the chapter. And as I said, even if your assignment doesn't begin at the beginning of the chapter, go back and take a look at those. The chapter objectives will give you an explanation of how the information, how the material in the textbook is organized, and help you, once again, to guide you as you go through that information. And they, again, tell you what you should know after you've read that assignment. They really and truly lay out for you what the chapter or that section of the book is going to cover and provide you then with guidance as to what you should be learning from that writing, in addition to the unit objectives. So again, take a look at those unit objectives. Highlight and identify information as you find it in the reading that relates to those chapter objectives, and that it should be organized in the same order that those objectives are presented at the beginning of the chapter. As you proceed through the chapter, it should identify and match up to the chapter objectives. Once you've completed the reading, then I would suggest that you review that reading by going back and think about what did you see in that reading that, number one, relates to the chapter objective, and number two, relates to the unit objectives. Again, if you're not clear as to what information goes together, you have a resource to consult, that being your instructor. And that will end this section of your overview.